Hi, all. Welcome, everyone. Good evening, good morning, wherever you may be. Absolutely delighted to see you all here today for our fireside chat on demystifying workstreams. That's surprisingly lesser known, but very, very important aspect of project management. I'm Naomi, the digital marketing lead at Progeo, your hosts for today. And for those who don't know us, we are the next gen adaptive portfolio project management tool designed to intuitively adapt to shifting needs in project management and enable operational excellence. We're built on 3 layers, including our patented project map, which you'll hear more about throughout this session. And I'm very, very, very excited to share that we have an actual completely free element of our app available to you guys today. The link will be shared after the session. Now, without further ado, I'll present you to our esteemed moderator and speaker. We have an absolute honor today to host Dr. Mike Clayton. Sorry, I shouldn't forget that bit. One of the top project management voices, I think, within the industry in the UK. He's an influencer, a trainer, the author of 14 books, including 5 focused specifically on project management, and comes with a whole wealth of knowledge and perspective from his long-standing and impressive career in the industry. He'll be hosting, moderating a very engaging chat with our veteran and our fearless leader, Yaniv Shor, CEO and co-founder of Progeo. An extremely impressive, again, industry veteran, over 20 years of experience in huge corporates such as Intel and Verifone, also the author of an esteemed book called Time to Deliver, designed and written on his kind of project management journey as he was building out Progeo, and a member of the Forbes Technology Council. So I think from what you've heard, this little snippet of both of them right now, you'll agree that we have a very impressive array of knowledge and experience between the two of them. And I, for one, am very excited about this conversation. I've had a few pre-discussions, and they both have a lot to say on this very interesting topic within the world of project management. And so before we get started, I'll just point out that for housekeeping, please do feel free to drop any questions you have during their discussion into the chat or into the Q&A. We will save some time at the end for those questions. I'll be able to moderate them. For now, we'll kind of go with the flow of the conversation, and we'll save them for then. But as they come up, do feel free to drop them into the chat. So without further ado, please welcome Mike and Yaniv.
Thank you, Naomi. Yaniv, it's great to be with you, and I know we both share an interest in work streams, and it was interesting to me to discover how important they are to you and to your model of project management and program and portfolio management, and in the way you built Progeo. Because when I was actually researching a video on work streams, I discovered that some organizations that people will have heard of, like PMI and APM, don't even mention them in their keystone kind of manuals and bodies of knowledge. So since you thought so deeply about it, I thought I'd start by asking you the obvious question. What is a work stream? What are work streams?
Thank you, Mike. And first of all, thank you for being here. It's great to have this kind of discussion with professionals like you. So first of all, thank you for being here. Really happy to start the discussion. So what are work streams? We'll cover that in the next hour, I guess. But to make a long story short, work stream is, just a new way to head the project diagram and the project plan. In our view, it's also a more intuitive way. In a way, it's about the way people are thinking about projects. Usually in the past, it was always a network of tasks. But this is not the intuitive way people are thinking about projects, right? When they're trying to arrange a project, even inside their head, they will think about several work streams. They will say, oh, I must do things in that area, and I need to do other stuff in the other area. And they will start structure the project this way in the head, and of course, when they're trying to sketch a plan or to build a diagram, they will follow a similar process in order to make it visible and understandable for everyone. So work streams are really there to be able to head a project plan in a more intuitive and clear way. And this is where we started thinking about that. When I was a project manager myself, I was always looking for ways to present projects, in a clearer way. And I ended up, placing some work streams on the left and building a timeline on the top.
Yeah.
To the point that I was thinking, okay, maybe we can do an application that do exactly that. And this is how the workstream process started.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it always seemed intuitive. When I first heard the term, I'd seen Gantt charts and you had these streams of activities, and it just seemed like another example of project management fundamentally using metaphors. We use metaphors when we talk about deadlines and milestones. A work stream is just another metaphor for a stream of work that kind of follows one thing after another. But I like your way of thinking that it's actually an organizing principle that helps us to understand things. And so they're fundamental to the way you design Projeo, which means that you must consider them more than just a kind of useful way of thinking. So why are they so important in the structuring of what is an industry leading piece of software? Why are you trying to get people to think in work streams?
Yeah, it's a great question, because at the end of the day, other than being, other than looking good, it should have additional value. And I think if you go back to Gantt charts, it's not like Gantt charts are not good or not an optional way to present a project diagram. And many times people intuitively building work streams into a Gantt chart. WBS is definitely a method that is following that idea. But I think there is something more valuable in forcing people to do so. Because when we design a diagram with work streams, we didn't just open that as an option for a way to head a Gantt chart. We design it in a way that you must organize your work into work stream. Now, beyond being more clear and more visual, work streams are also a way for you to organize the project coordination plan. Because if you build one work stream and another work stream, any connection between one work stream to the other will be a coordination item. I'll give you an example. If I'm heading the hardware team and I need to send something to the factory, then of course, the project manager need to focus about this package moving from the hardware team to the factory. If there are other tasks within the hardware team, it is not as critical and important in a way the project is structured. So you can identify a coordination plan by just looking at work streams. And by the way, we are developing this idea these days even into AI, because you actually can teach the application something about the project structure, even if the application is not really knowledgeable about your domain, right? So I think this is why work streams are very valuable, way beyond just visual.
Yeah. And I've noticed in the chat that my friend Loredana Abramo makes the point that work streams relate to work breakdown structures. And that's how I've come to understand them. And when we build our work breakdown structure, the first thing we start thinking about is what's the first layer of breakdown? How do we break down the project into a series of chunks, and they become our work streams? But I think you're going a little further, aren't you? You're actually starting to think about it as saying, by thinking about it as almost discrete flows of work that coordinate, should lead us to actually ask, how are we going to break down the work, and not necessarily accept what is a common approach, which is the functional or product approach, but actually say, how do we de-risk the project? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it is. And if you really like to find an easy way to define your project work stream, think about those people that are being invited to the kickoff meeting. Because they're going to sit in the room with you, right? You will have that lead and that functional lead and another lead. These are the people that are actually heading the project domain. And you would like them to look at the screen and see this line that is completely owned by them, because this is how they will understand their role in the project, because they might have something very interesting and important to do at the beginning of the process of the project, and then something very critical at the end of the project. And if you put that at two ends of a Gantt chart, they're not going to see their responsibility in a single line. So I think one way to look at work streams is simply by looking at these domains and these domain owners that are being presented in your project. By the way, these are not necessarily team leaders. You know, it can be a team leader, but if you have a person that is a functional area lead, let's say he's responsible for shipment. You know, shipment can be very critical for some projects. So you can build it as a work stream because it's part of your coordination plan. It's part of the project structure. So not necessarily a team leader.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that always strikes me about work streams is that if we think work stream, it's a way of de-risking the project. Because one of the things a lot of people ask me is, why does communication channels matter in project management? It's one of those things that you have to learn about, the kind of maths of how many people connect up. And the answer for me is, the more people you've got that need to talk to one another, the growth in the complexity of your project just grows at with the square of the number of people. So it grows very fast. And if you, one thing I've often said is, you know, you should break our projects down so that we've got multiple projects. But by using work streams, we can break our project down, keep it all under one organizing project, but we reduce the amount of communication we need because the work streams can speak to each other without the need for individuals. All of the individual connections, and that simplifies the project a lot, I think.
Yeah, I think that it can also highlight, you mentioned risk earlier, and it's a very a good comment. It can also highlight these areas where risk is higher. Because if you have, let's say you have a task sitting somewhere on a work stream, and this task is being fed from multiple other work streams, this is a clear indication for a risk. Because with any additional work stream or domain, you're actually feeding this task before you can even start, you are increasing risk by definition. And I think that, Mike, maybe this is a question to you. There are so many models in the market for analyzing risk, like, you know, with the red color, green color, and of course with RSCI. So you can relate to these models and even add information to it by saying, this is an additional risk because of the connection to all these other work streams.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. One of the things that I really liked that PMI did in its latest version of the PMBOK guide, their guide to the project management body of knowledge, was they talked not so much about risk. I mean, it's in there, of course, but actually they frame it as being about working in a VUCA environment: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I think the more you can simplify complex projects, and our projects are getting more and more complex, then that's a way of de-risking them, as is reducing volatility, as is reducing uncertainty and ambiguity. So yeah, and actually it's never occurred to me, but your idea of actually rating the risk of a project overall by trying to get a measure of its complexity would seem to be a sensible approach. I like the idea at the start of a project of doing some sort of a risk potential review. What is the potential risk of this project? As a filter for deciding whether a project should move forward to the next stage of evaluation, or possibly to saying how much net value should it have in order to justify not just the cost, because net value takes that into account, but the risk as well. So I like that.
Yeah, that's right. And I you know, one thing that we're seeing among our customers, that they are adding work streams as part of the project progress. You know, usually you are trying to evaluate project complexity and risk at the beginning, and sometimes you're missing some tasks, and you add these tasks to the project, but the project risk is really increased if you forget a work stream.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you're actually saying, oh, we didn't involve you know, this and that team.
Yeah.
This is a complete new work stream, and it adds risk to the entire project. And by the way, this is why we're encouraging people to use templates, because if you build a template correctly, without even too many tasks inside, but you're listing the work streams according to the organizational knowledge, then the chances for you to forget about an involvement of a certain team in a project really reduces, because you see, oh, I need to involve that team as well.
Yeah. I don't know what's in your templates, and I hope I'm not going to cause a problem. But to me, the most forgotten work stream when people plan projects, and most forgotten part or sector of a work breakdown structure, if you start that way, is actually managing the project. So many project managers forget all the tasks that need to get carried out to manage a project, and therefore, when they allocate resources to their project, they miss resources off all the project management disciplines. When they budget the project, they don't budget for enough project management resource and enough project management time. And then they wonder why they're having to manage on their own without a team trying to run a big project, because they just didn't have that work stream in mind. And whilst there's no absolute necessity that you represent it as a work stream, the absolute necessity is that you remember it and allocate it into your project.
Yeah, this can be interesting to ask, people attending the webinar to say, what is the missing work stream?
Yeah.
I can contribute mine. It's always documentation. You always forget about documentation. In the past, it used to be like a paper documents, but today it's an online document. And I think that this is, people tend to always leave that behind. It requires a lot of work from the beginning of the project, and you always remember that only at the last minute.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, documentation brings me on to something that I've been wondering, because, of course, if you go back to the Agile Manifesto, one of the things they don't say ignore documentation. That would be ridiculous. But they do lower the value they allocate to documentation. So I've been wondering, do work streams as a way of thinking only apply to what we might call traditional predictive projects, or are they useful in a more adaptive environment?
It's a very good point, and I think that this entire area is still, developing, I would say, because you're seeing more and more scaled agile approaches in the market that are being, sometimes the trend is stronger, sometimes it's weaker, but you're definitely seeing that. And I think this is a result of all the agile work finally ending up searching for a higher level presentation. And finding a way to a diagram that can really describe the work. So even in a classic scaled agile, you do see a diagram that, in a way, also showing work streams. So I think it's a good way to connect agile work with traditional predictive or waterfall work, where you're actually creating the agile work inside buckets, and you're linking it all the way up into a diagram. We are allowing that even in the more technical level, like connecting to development tools like Jira. But I think also conceptually, this is something you can definitely do. And hybrid project can also be presented this way with work streams.
Yeah. And I think that when a lot of people think about Agile, they are still really thinking about a simple Scrum project with one development team working on their own to develop one simple set of products. But the reality of, I guess, a lot of the people who will be attending this webinar is that actually they're managing big projects, programs where you've got multiple development teams working together, and an obvious solution is to consider each development team working in their own work stream and therefore needing to coordinate and hand off. So that's really helpful. You've mentioned a couple of times that Progeo makes good use of work streams and teams can use them powerfully. And I wondered whether you'd be able to show us some examples of what work streams look like in Progeo as a way of understanding a little bit more about the different use cases and how people can apply the principles to their own projects and programs.
Of course. Let me share my screen for a second. And I think it also will connect to what was previously asked about hybrid projects. And I will explain how it can potentially work. So I'm not going to go into too many details. We can share these examples with the audience later on. But I'm going to just show some examples. And these examples, I would like to show that you can actually use all kind of level of details. In this case, for example, you do see quite a significant amount of details, and keep in mind that behind every block, you can have additional details. But on the left, you can see the work streams. So if this is a new product launch, you would like to include product development and market readiness. These will be the colorful lines, and of course, the strategic oversight. And in each area, you will list these teams or domains that are going to lead the activity. In some cases, you would like to use like activities that is being done in parallel. So you'll create two work streams that are actually the same. But still, if you're connecting from this work stream to the other, it actually means that the product management need to add something to quality assurance. This is always an issue. And the smaller the slack is, the bigger the issue is. So when looking at the project, you can identify these connections easily, and the application can also help you with that. So this will be a project that is generally detailed. Of course, you can build the same thing in higher level. Sometimes you don't like to go into the details, and some of our customers are using that option in cases where they don't need to go into the details, so they will do it higher level. If we will relate for a second to, I'll skip a bit in order to show you that. In that project, we have a sprint workstream. It actually means that there is a development team running sprints. There are many items, 12 in this case, in each sprint. And this agile work is actually serving, in a wider sense, an application development effort. At the end of the day, the application will go out someday, and it will need an online documentation, right? And it will need someone to place it into the App Store, and someone else to write some marketing materials for that. And this is how an agile work will finally turn into a predictive project with work streams, with timeline, and with a need to present it to a team. So in this example, you can definitely see agile work being consolidated or presented inside a work stream diagram. And by the way, we are seeing agile work not only within software teams. We have a very big biotech organization working agile end-to-end in a factory, and they're rolling up the activity into a very big project map with Workstream in order to present different engineering activities in their production line. So this is, I think, a good example of how hybrid project can be managed with Agile underneath.
That's excellent. And I think some of the charts you showed us show just how easy it is to answer questions like, can we just see a strategy chart? Can we just have something at board level just to understand the broad strategy and how that can then overlay onto the other business as usual priorities of the departments and the teams. So I think that's really interesting. So this emphasis on work streams and the value that they deliver to organizations is, I think, what differentiates Project from similar tools, well, other tools, let's say, in the same space, your competitors. How do the project managers, the PMOs, the senior leaders that you and your colleagues speak to react to this?
So thank you. It's a very good question, because at the end of the day, every project manager will ask, okay, great, what's in it for me, right? Why should I use that? I can use, I don't know, Microsoft Project or whatever other solution out there in the market. And I think that aside from being organized in a more intuitive way, and aside from building clearer views, there are certain value add areas where you can get from using that, that method. I think that it starts in the way you're working with your team. If you have a timeline like that, you can collaborate over a timeline. Today people are looking into ways to collaborate with other people that are either working remotely or at the other side of the globe. And in order to do that, they need a visual tool. So once you're building a diagram that is really organized that way, you can start talk about that. You can send message about that. You can write a notification that will pop up somewhere in the future, and you can do it in a very clear way over the timelines that you have organized by a work stream. So this is value number one. I think that value number two is the ability to use it in project meetings. When I was a project manager, I was building Gantt charts, but then heading into a project meeting, I had to create a slide because people can't understand a Gantt chart. And then I had to send this slide to everyone with some explanation in an email or whatever. I couldn't really collaborate over a timeline and use it in a project meeting. And I think that if you organize the diagram correctly by workstream, you can put it on the screen in a project meeting, and the people in the room can find themselves, their teams, inside the diagram. And finally, in order to present to management, managers will always understand a more visual view. And I think that you can use that in order to present to management. Of course, once this is in place, people kind of getting used to the diagram that is built this way by workstreams. And from here, you can grow into other areas, like you can present resources utilization as another layer over the same diagram. You can present your process management, like the workflow the project is going through. So you can get a lot from, it's like closing a small gap at the very low level, and then you have many layers of value you can actually build on top of that. And I think that this is what differentiates our solution from other solutions that can be great. I was personally using some of my competitors' solutions. I think that we are just coming in with a more modern approach to do that, and maybe with a better fit for 2024.
I think I like the link you made to collaboration, because I think one of the things that project management, program management, the project profession, let's call it, most needs now is more and better ways to collaborate remotely. We've had our hand really forced by COVID a few years back, but the fact is there had been insufficient research into what works, and I think by providing new tools and seeing how people use it and adapting them, I think we've got a fighting chance of finding real ways that people can work effectively remotely. But I don't think there's yet the full answer to that. But it's nice that you're working on it.
Yeah, you said effective, and I would like to stay on that word for a second. You and I are young enough to remember these projects that were all about delivery. It was always the delivery date and the delivery delay and the reason for the delivery delay. The focus was there. But I think in 2024, you're not only looking at delivery, you're looking at being more efficient. People these days, they need to be cost effective, sometimes cost saving. So efficiency is so important, sometimes even more than the delivery date. And if you like to be more efficient, as you said yourself, then you need to collaborate, exchange information. This is the only way to be more efficient, actually drive continuous improvement.
Yeah, and I think it needs to be real time, and it needs to be allow people to work on that information sharing tool, that graphic tool, that collaboration tool in their own time. When I started working on international collaborations, for a start, everyone had the phrase "be west of the rest," because fundamentally American time drove everyone else. When the Americans were finally awake, they could have their calls, which meant that those of us in Europe or in the Far East had to be up into early hours to do that. But now, with tools like this, people can work when they're comfortable working, and they can contribute, and they can draw down the knowledge they need. They can update the information, and it's there in real time for when the next time zone wakes up, starts work, and is ready. And I think that is going to be the big kind of game changer for project managers, and it's what's going to allow us to really harness the global talent, because it now no longer matters for a lot of projects where you draw your project team members from.
Yeah, right. And this is also where Workstream Owner come to play, because you're arranging your diagram by workstream, but you're also assigning an owner to the workstream. So let's say you have a very big project. Each workstream or workstreams is actually headed with an owner. So you are getting access to update your own workstream. And if you'll try to reschedule a task in a way that impact another workstream, the application is not going to let you do that. So
Mhm.
you can play within your own playground
Yeah.
as long as you are not going to impact another work stream. And
Yeah.
then the other person waking up in a different time zone can do that as well. And if you're stuck in a situation where you need to impact another work stream, this is exactly when you start collaborate.
Yeah.
So we are really using the work stream ownership as a way to also authorize or prevent people from changing the plan if they are out of the work stream. And it's not an application thing. It just follows the way project team actually work.
Yeah.
Because you can't just push a task that belongs to someone else, right? You need to talk with a guy. So we are allowing you to do that.
Yeah. And actually, I don't want to move on without just acknowledging a piece of language that you've used, and I think words really do matter. And you've been referring to workstream owners. Traditionally, I've always thought in terms of workstream leaders, but I like the term owner. We talk about assigning ownership of risks as a way of making sure the risk gets dealt with rather than just left on the risk register. And I like the idea of moving from workstream leaders to workstream owners, because to me, the word owner brings with it a sense of responsibility. And I think that's really nice. And if you're going to own a work stream, yes, you've got to be a leader and you've got to lead your team. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, what the organization is seeing now is a possibly slightly sharpened precision to the allocation of responsibilities, which I
That's
like.
right. We're
Yeah,
also taking it one small step forward because we're
yeah,
using the avatar, not your name.
yeah,
So when the project is being presented in a project meeting, it's your picture out there,
yeah,
as the workstream owner. And
yeah,
you really like it to be filed and, with progress report and everything, because it's you, you are heading this workstream. It's your ownership.
yeah. Yes, and that's important as well, because Robert Cialdini, in talking about how do we influence people to do things, makes it very clear that the more conspicuous you are in making a commitment, the more likely you are to really deliver on that commitment. And seeing people's images alongside their work stream is a powerful way, I should think. And I certainly always, at the in project meetings, say, you should always go around the meeting at the end and say to each person, this is what you committed to doing. Are you still committed to doing it? Because once someone says yes in front of their peer group, then there's a strong internal sense of responsibility.
Right.
Now, before we hand over to Naomi to see what questions are coming in, it seems to me that in putting the focus on work streams, you've really highlighted an underappreciated concept in project management. So, do you think there's anything else rattling around at the back of your mind that is another underappreciated concept that we should be putting more focus on? And I'm not, by the way, looking to see the secrets of the Progeo roadmap, but as one project manager to others, what do you think we're not putting enough attention on?
So, first of all, in the future, it will be AI. AI capabilities are, being introduced this year more than ever, and including in our application. And I think that gradually this will be this, leading edge for project managers to better manage, not necessarily building the plan, because this will continue to be a project manager world for some time, but definitely tracking and drive some summaries. This is definitely something that will kick in a very strong way this year. But going back to your question, I think that you mentioned this area, and this is risk assessment. I think if I need to name one area that is completely underestimated by project managers, it's risk assessment. To me, it's 50% of the project planning and creation. And the more senior you are, the higher importance you're assigning to risk management. Because when you're managing risk, you're actually trying to project all these things that are not going to happen.
Mm.
This is equally important as projecting the things that will happen. So
Yes.
I'm always trying to encourage project managers to focus more on risk assessment. And this is also why we have a complete module only dealing with that. And I always looking at the way customers are using that, I'm saying, oh, you need to use that more. It's not only about the project plan, it's about all these things that you would like to prevent, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a risk management.
Maybe there's a kind of little nudge that you need to build into the way the software is presented on people's screens to kind of nudge them towards that and make it
Right.
make it easier. Because for me, I suppose I had two sort of answers to my own question. Regular viewers of my YouTube channel will know that one of the things I go on and on about is the need for project managers to really understand psychology. And we talked a bit about, the psychology of putting people's attention where we think it's important so far. And that ability to kind of nudge people is another example. But I think what I think we're not thinking about enough is our social responsibility as project managers. I think this is something that is going to be big. And I think the consequences of all the changes that are happening in the world, particularly in societies, demand that project managers kind of think about that in setting up their projects. They should be thinking about, what does each work stream contribute outside of the project? How does it touch the real world? How does it touch all the different stakeholders? I think your comment is quite profound. Famously, Tim Lister said, risk management is how adults manage projects. And I've always interpreted that, I think, in a similar way to the way I read you, in that, when we're young, new project managers, we focus on, planning the project and delivering it and getting stuff done. As we get more mature, we realize that actually we're quite good at planning. We know how to plan. The things that actually lead to projects failing is not usually that the plan's wrong, but because we didn't anticipate something,
Right.
And that's risks. And I think that's what he means by that. And I've kind of added this corollary that stakeholder engagement is the way sophisticated adults manage projects, because where do a lot of our risks come from? It comes from people, whether it's the political sphere or whether it's the community or the users or the customers. And I think we need to be really focused on that, and that kind of stakeholder engagement to understand how our projects work in society.
Yeah, definitely agree. You summarize it better than I could ever do. I'll just comment. You mentioned social responsibility. We are definitely seeing in the past, I would say even 3 or 4 years, more focus on sustainability projects.
Mm-hmm.
We're even seeing, I would say, it is being developed as a separated domain within project management with a specific focus on OKRs. Because we finally need to measure the way project contributes to sustainability, to environmental factors. We're definitely seeing that, and I hope that this trend will continue.
Yeah. And interestingly, I was talking to Naomi, who introduced us before we started, and she was saying that your team are working with people in the housing sector to use the tool for developing housing and meeting, big projects in the housing sector. And I think, that the social sector has long been the kind of lost child of project management. They've been struggling to get stuff done. You get really good, committed people, but not having the tools available. And I think, the fact that you're making project available for people to use at no cost, at that, so to evaluate it, to understand it, to really get a sense of what it can do is exactly the right thing to do. And more people should be doing that. So I think we've covered a lot of ground there. Is there anything I've missed before that you want to say before I hand it back to Naomi to see what the community has asked?
No, thank you very much. You can go ahead.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, guys, for that super insightful discussion. And thanks, everybody who's online, for being really engaged, making comments, asking questions. We have about 25-27 minutes, so you still have time to pop something in the chat. But for now, I'll get started on the first question, and this is to Yaniv. What about human resource management? How do you influence the load via the app, via Projio?
Thank you very much, Naomi, and thank you for the question. I think that at the end of the day, resources utilization is the main goal of the entire thing. We were talking about efficiency several minutes ago. Efficiency is about the way you're using your resources. I would even extend this question beyond just labor, because it's also budget management. I think that the entire goal of building nice project diagrams, running project meetings, and collaborate over timelines, at the end of the day, you would like to better use your resources. So it's a major part of our application. And in a way, you can switch the diagram view into a resource utilization view with a click. So you can also actually see work streams, but this time it will be the groups that are contributing to one project or a complete portfolio. And I think that if you are using a similar visual, it also helps people understand, because, for example, if they would like to focus on, I don't know, June of 24, then they have a visual of the project that's being managed in June. And then they can switch to look at the resource management for the same period of time. Now, my experience showed that organizations are not always looking at all the resources. They have the problem. They know they're missing, I don't know, lab workers, or they're missing developers. So they will focus on this skill that is relevant and is the bottleneck. And this is where they will focus most of the analysis. We are trying to allow customers doing that by assigning user into a group, into a skill, into a location. So you can later on run all these parameters and check where your resources, how your resources are used. Another way to look at that is from a reporting point of view, where you can create like summaries in a bar chart or even a stack chart, when you can show your quarters or years, and then decide if you'd like to focus on percentages, headcount number, or even effort points if you're doing Agile projects, and see how your resources are being used over time. So I think that exactly the same approach of work streams, once implemented, you can take it one layer up and see your resources in the exact same way, in the same visual.
Can I add something, Naomi? Because I think one of the real strengths of a work stream approach, which starts with an understanding of the organization that is operating the projects or programs, is that it allows each work stream to look at the pinch points for its people. And I think one of the things too few project and program managers do is think about actually the heartbeat activities within the parent organization. So, for example, HR might be particularly busy in the autumn because that's when we recruit people. And therefore, the ability of members of the operational team to contribute to projects and programs is diminished. And by having an HR-based work stream, they can mark that in, and it can become, if you like, a fixed constraint in the plan that everyone can understand. Whereas the finance team may not be busy then, it may be busy in spring because it's closing accounts. It may be that the IT team is busy in the summer or is actually constrained in the summer because so many people are away that they can't manage support. So by thinking in terms of work streams, we can also understand how the project needs to schedule its activities into the heartbeats, the different heartbeat rhythms of the organization.
Yeah, that's right. And the heartbeat is also a very important element generally in project management. Sometimes it's the time period, like month or quarter, but sometimes it's sprints, right? We just discussed Agile.
Yeah.
So if you understand the heartbeat, you can also reflect it in the way you are managing your project. And I think it's a very good point if you like to really follow that.
Okay, thanks both. So the next question is, how can the tool, for you again, Yaniv, how can the tool be used, excuse me, to track programs?
Thank you for that. First of all, visually, when you're creating a diagram that can be presented on screen, it is appear with a today line. It is crossing somewhere, and the today line has this tendency to move forward one day, every day. And then you can visually see if the tasks that are being planned until the today line are actually reported as done. There are visual marks for that. So you can visually see in a very easy way where the project is at. But of course, you don't like to track projects just with looking at visual diagrams, right? So you have all kind of reports that are actually helping you get deeper understanding of where the projects are. And the most simple way to do that is to look at overdue tasks. The overdue tasks, or if you're looking at a portfolio, then it will be overdue tasks by project, giving you a very good sense of where the project is at. The project with many overdue tasks either is behind or need to be rescheduled, where a project without overdue tasks actually on track. We will show you this information in very details if you go into the project level. And we're also going to show it to you in high level if you look at the portfolio. And I think that this is the best way to follow the project progress. And of course, many other small collaboration-related capabilities like sending you the email on the right time and inform you about upcoming tasks and show you what's new when you are back from vacation and going into the project. These are all capabilities that exist, but I think that at first is about looking at overdue tasks. This is the best way to track the progress.
It's interesting because you've put the focus on the question as how can you track programs, whereas when Naomi read it, I heard the emphasis on how can you track programs. And as a former program manager, I interpreted it really as, is there a difference in the way that Progio or a workstream approach would handle programs and projects? And I was reflecting on that. And I think when I was managing programs, I think my first instinct would have been to take each project and make it a work stream, because that's the natural way that program managers think. We think, okay, I've got 6 projects and each one is effectively a work stream, and therefore a program is really nothing other than a big project with with a huge project with big work streams. However, where I've come to see that this approach could change your attitude to programs is you can start with the work streams that are based perhaps on the functional teams within the organization, and then each of those teams could have a number of work streams representing the work they're doing on each of the different projects, so that you can then allow each team to see how its different project activities compare against one another and fit into one another. So you're not just trying to fit the project into the organization, you're actually tailoring the way that you schedule your projects to the parts of the organization. And I think if I'd have been able to do that when I was running programs back in the days of yore, that would have been marvelous. I think it would have made life a lot easier.
Yeah, Mike, thank you for explaining that. We are calling it a master project. Like the program is a master project at the end of the day. Without going into all the technical details, we allow building like a master project and run some projects underneath. This will be the program level. Now, the interesting thing about that is sometimes you have a work stream that is actually built from 3 different projects that is actually running underneath, a complete project. And side by side, you can have work streams that they actually built from tasks. So you can play with that and match exactly the way you would like your project diagram to look like. And actually, you can assign project to other people that will see only that project. But you will stay on the program level, like control the whole thing. Now, to go back to the question, how can you track that? We talked earlier about workstream and the way they're helping you coordinating between tasks. You can do exactly the same in the program level. And the connection between projects, in that case, will help you coordinate the entire program.
I think philosophically, there's an interesting evolution that's happened over the years as well. I mean, years ago, as a program manager, we used to think, programs are different to projects. They're not just big projects. But now, organizations like in the UK, the Association for Project Management just talks about project-based working to roll up the ideas of project management, program management, and portfolio management. Yeah, there are some wrinkles, but even things like when we did program management, we said, well, we think about benefits at program level, not at project level. At project level, we just deliver stuff. We don't worry about the benefits and the outcomes. Now that is just simply not true. At program level, we are happy to be sitting in a space of uncertainty about what's going to be happening. At projects, we lock down certainty. But now with everyone building an element of adaptive delivery into their projects because the world's changing so fast, that's not true anymore. And I think now we need tools that actually take us seamlessly between the tier of product development to project development to program development to portfolio, and allow us to think in the way that suits our organization and the people in our organization, rather than be hidebound by some definition. If you're going to argue whether it's a project or a program or portfolio, take that to the pub or the bar or the coffee shop, because I don't think that has a place in the world of work now. We just deal with what's in front of us, the changes we need to create as project professionals or project working professionals, whatever we want to call ourselves. We have those changes to deliver, and we need to get on and deliver it. And we need the tools that allow us to do it in a way that suits the culture of our organizations.
Yeah, that's right. It may be also good for like a closing statement, because you're actually adding another layer that we didn't discuss too much today. Like we talked about a project, we talked about resources, but you're actually talking here about the process. Like what data is actually collected about these objects? Like if it's a project, I first need to collect a lot of information about that. If it's a program, I'd like to make sure that all the parameters that are important in my organization will be attached to the program as an object. And I think that this is another layer. We are allowing that by creating all kind of columns and metrics and calculated fields, because we believe that even before you created the first diagram, you need to collect a lot of information just to match what is required in your organization without even assigning a task to anyone. So this is another layer, maybe a topic for another webinar. How can you, manage, sometimes I'm calling it a pipeline. Like you have a sales pipeline, you're actually measuring deals in order to finally decide which deal will be best on your CRM system. But projects and programs are actually the same. All kind of information finally serving and justifying the project, prioritizing that, rank it with other projects. And this is a complete layer. It's a complete application that mostly used even before you put together the first diagram.
Yeah. And of course, this is the layer that artificial intelligence is going to work from to be really helpful. When we understand how to collate that information and make it properly available, that's when AI is going to start to be really useful. If we're populating that layer honestly and fully, then AI is going to make useful suggestions to us, I think.
Definitely.
I'm just going to squeeze one more question for both of you, but we're happy to follow up with this, and we'll be doing a live session as well where we jump on just for a Q&A. So this isn't the end. The final question is, in a Gantt chart, I also have buckets of tasks and dependencies. What exactly is the difference that work streams make?
Without going into too many details, the way the work streams are built, it creates a slightly different way to connect between tasks. Of course, two tasks on a work stream can be connected, but the underlying work, like behind every task, it works like a container. It's a more agile way. The tasks inside a container are actually linked by start to start and finish to finish with the container. So if you like to push out something, you will have to extend the container. So there is a different set of links that are finally building this diagram. But of course, at the end of the day, it works the same way. And we talk about dependencies and ability to project the project delivery date, like, for example, critical chain or any calculation like that. But the internals are slightly different from a typical Gantt chart. And, this is why we have a patent over this diagram. Otherwise, it's not a patent. If it's the same structure, it's not a patent.
So Yaniv nearly said out loud the phrase critical chain, which was actually the answer that I was thinking of as you asked that question, Amy, because fundamentally, I think one of the things I've always put down my success claim that I have never delivered a commercial project late is critical chain thinking. And it's years since I read the book and I don't know all the formality, but the idea that having a chain of activities and understanding how contingency applies to that chain rather than to the individual activities, but also isolating those activities and therefore the risks to sets of activities from one another is what gives you a real sense of control. If each work stream is able to plan its activities, knowing what the key dates are, but not being dependent on activities or as independent as possible, because there's some realism we have to imply here, but being as independent as possible from activities in other work streams de-risks the project massively. And if you can build those dependencies around key dates that everyone plans around, or key events that everyone plans around, so that and use those as the points where we create the breaks. I think of them as fire breaks, those kind of periods of stability in the project where if any work stream or any chain of events overruns, that's fine because everyone's waiting till the end of that fire break period before necessarily starting up. So I think that the idea of work streams adds a lot to the Gantt chart planning, because Gantt chart planning is fundamentally, let's add some contingency to every single activity and give every task manager a little bit of discretion over how long they take. Whereas if you give that discretion to the owner of the work stream and you require them to manage things, then as a project or program manager or project or program lead, you then are seeing a much less risky prospect ahead of you.
Yeah, and then, and then your effort is turned to avoid the critical chain. Now you can see the critical chain on the screen and you're trying to avoid that. Like, I don't like to be there.
Yeah.
This is what all the focus is. I'm going to try and avoid it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mike, Yaniv, thank you so much. It's been a really fascinating discussion. I hope that everybody has learned something new, and I'll be very happy to hear what that is and what you took away from the session tomorrow when I send around my feedback survey. Everybody who attended will also receive a sneak peek preview of our brand new Demystifying Workstreams ebook, which is a really fun read, so you'll all enjoy that, along with the recording. And we'd love to see you again at future webinars. We're trying to put these on every few months around topics that we think are really important and integral to modern adaptive project portfolio management. So we hope to see you again. And thank you very much for your time as well. We know that it's, it's not taken for granted to take an hour out of your morning, day, evening, wherever you may be, and spend that with us. So thank you again. And have a lovely rest of your day or evening, and hope to see you soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you again, Mike.
Goodbye. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.